Coping with life can be difficult if we get completely absorbed by all its dramas. Becoming more detached and using a mindful viewpoint to observe your subjective reality can help, especially when you're able to not only work through life on a practical day-to-day level, but also see the symbolism of events that occur directly to you. You wouldn't guess it now, but not long ago we actually had extreme flash floods occur right here in North Yorkshire. What we're going to look at today is not so much why this occurred, but how we can look at an event like this that's fairly dramatic as a symbolic representation of an interaction that's going on in your subjective reality. So we're going to look at this not so much as an objective flooding event that affected many people, but really from a spiritual point of view. I want to illustrate, using this example, how you can look at events that happen in your life on a purely symbolic level. And by doing so, you can learn a lot about not only yourself, but about your relationship with the management upstairs and what's going on in your own reality. Hello there, my name's Tim Walter. I'm a house healer and an alternative life coach. Welcome to the channel. This is where we work with a sort of a practical spirituality, working with the subtle realms to help bring well-being into our lives for the benefit of yourself and the world around you. So what do you feel when you see devastation like this that's being caused by a flood on the news? How does that make you feel? Obviously this is fairly dramatic, but it's nothing compared to the annihilation and the chaos that has been caused out in the Bahamas by Hurricane Dorian. But what do you feel when you see that on the news? And more importantly, what do you feel when you experience it directly in your life? There's an important difference. One, you're experiencing it directly. All your senses are involved in it, obviously, because it's within your own reality. In the other case, it's all coming from the news feed, from the media. It isn't directly coming into your senses. So, what we're looking at today is how we work with the information that comes to us when stuff happens to us directly in our own senses. But the significant difference is really how we respond to it and what we do with the information like this when it comes to us directly into our senses, when we physically experience it in our lives. Now, in all of what we're going to be talking about today, my heart goes out to those people that have lost livestock, pets, been injured, or even just had extensive damage to their homes. I have nothing but sympathy for those people, and I'm just using this as an example because it's such a dramatic example that has been close to home for a particular way of viewing life. Now, a lot of you will be saying, well, how can you possibly look at something like this as a symbolic act when there's clearly been so much damage? But you know, when you start to realize that actually we are just a part of a greater being and everything that happens in life is part of the picture that continues substantially after we actually step into the next world, when we pass away, then everything starts to get put into perspective. The faith that one has to know that an aspect of self continues after this life enables you to actually be a bit more detached from your own experience of life. Let me just take you through the events that happened in that afternoon and illustrate to you how this can be perceived as that bizarre symbolic event. What we had here was a month's worth of rain that fell in just 4 hours. The water table rose and it came in not only through the back door, but also through the stone walls. We had water in most rooms on the ground floor. But this is where it gets interesting from a symbolic point of view. When my wife and I moved into this house some 2.5 years ago, the back door was sealed shut. We knew that it was a potential flood risk, but it was also obvious from an energy flow point of view that it should be opened up. Eventually we got round to doing that on Friday the 26th of July, and the result was that the house immediately felt better for it. But that wasn't all that had been going on in my reality around that time. I've been doing some much needed deep healing work on myself, including consulting a homeopath,
And a few weeks before the rains had come, I'd finally asked the management upstairs to do some healing on the hills behind the house, because they still seemed heavy from the effects of centuries of historical mining. And then there was also the fact that as we have been working on sorting out the neglected garden, we've been lifting layer upon layer of plastic that had been buried as a weed suppressant and taking up tons of concrete that had been laid by the previous owners. Finally, at last, the soil can now breathe again. And after all this, the rains came. A symbolic cleansing. After the flood, the land certainly felt lighter. It felt cleared, washed, cleansed. Suddenly here, around the house and on the hillside, it felt really, really zingy. So what does this really mean to me? What does it symbolically mean? Well, it's a cleansing. It's a cleansing. It's part of a process of healing. And healing brings on change, and it means that we have to confront stuff from our past, get over traumas, develop new perspectives on past wounds. And this really is what happened here. It's a shift of energy, a very dramatic one, of course. So that's looking at it all from my purely subjective point of view. That is my own individual interpretation of what happened, my subjective reality. And in my case, it's to do with my relationship to the management upstairs. This is not to say that I actually ignore completely the objective view of what happened. And objectively speaking, what happened was we had unusual weather patterns that gave us some intense flash floods. And that's all there is to it. That is as much as we can say is fact. Now this is the thing to me, is that actually it's the balance between the subjective point of view and the objective that actually gives us the harmony in living life. The objective view gives us a background, it gives us the basic information, but it's the subjective interpretation of what happened that actually gives life meaning.